Sisters, from my Franciscan heart to yours, a warm welcome to each of you. I really am so pleased to be with you as we continue our journey of preparation for your chapter, which, as you know, is now scheduled for August 2021. And the chapter steering committee has continued its task of preparing the congregation for the chapter. So with this video, we want to connect with you to set the context of our work over this next few months and to outline what that work will be and how the delegates will be engaged in it over the next 7 months leading to your chapter. I'm going to stop here and set up a PowerPoint presentation, which I will use throughout this time. And I want to give you a heads up a little bit. Throughout the PowerPoint presentation, I will be pausing after a particular slide just to give you a chance to take it in. And I say that to you so you don't get worried that I've lost my place or something like that. That may happen, but it's not likely. So, first of all, I would like to take a moment to ponder once again your chapter theme, embracing and responding to God's unfolding mystery. The logo situates this theme within the image of the larger world. And that's so appropriate because this larger world is where God's mystery does unfold and where your expression of our Franciscan charism is to shine and bear fruit. And so with the towel, we see that light coming into the world as you bring it. Now, we are quite aware, aren't we, that this world is significantly different now than it was when we began our preparations for your chapter in January 2019. The pandemic that has brought our world to a standstill has touched every aspect of our lives, spiritually, emotionally, physically. It has unsettled us, frightened us, separated us, and called us to view our lives very differently than before. And I am always struck by sisters who say that this has deeply impacted your sense of community, coming together just to be together, pray together, has been a real cross for many of us. And so we are being challenged in ways that we could never have imagined before. In speaking of COVID-19, Pope Francis describes it very well when he says, "Thick darkness has gathered over our squares, our streets, and our cities. It has taken over our lives, filling everything with a deafening silence and a distressing void that stops everything as it passes by. We feel it in the air, we notice it in people's glances and gestures. Their glances give them away. We find ourselves afraid and lost." Yes, indeed, the pandemic has intensified for us the political, economical, environmental crises of our times. Poverty, racial tensions, domestic violence, human trafficking, immigration concerns, job loss, all of these have intensified. All of these are issues that we keep trying to address in our own special way. And the violence in our nation's capital on January 6th made us ever more aware of the divisions that are so deeply rooted in our society. And we know that such threats that we witnessed on that day continue to be very real for us. In a recent online article, Ilia Delio put this reality plainly before us. She said, "The truth is, this country, and sisters, I add to her quote, this world, is in a state of despair. We are people desperate for hope, for signs of new life, for governments who put people before power, for someone who cares." This, sisters, is the context in which you will be doing your ongoing chapter work. We need to acknowledge this context and to know that the direction set by chapter will be lived out in a time of great crises. And the leaders that you elect will be leading in a time of great crises, as they have been. And yet, in the midst of the darkness, are we not also called to hope and to believe in the unfolding mystery of God that your chapter theme calls you to embrace and to which it calls you to respond? So, how do you embrace this time, believing that God is truly in it? How do you want to respond in light of your Franciscan charism, a charism of peace and joy? The question we as Franciscans ask so often, what is ours to do, seems to me to have even greater importance today. And we must consider that question in relationship to today's realities in our world, in our country, in the church, in religious life, and specifically in your own congregation. These realities shed light on our responses to that significant Franciscan question. And I offer a message from Joan Chittister, who I realize is a Benedictine, but she conveys this message quite well. She says, God must be sought in the light, in what is clearly real, not mythical, not magical, not meaningless. I want to stop here for a moment and invite you into the quiet of your own hearts to ponder what you have heard and also to consider your own experience in these challenging times. What is your heartache? What is your blessing? What do you want to most contribute to this chapter journey in light of all of this? I invite you to hold the fruits of this simple, brief reflection in your hearts and to continue to contemplate them often as you move through this chapter journey. Before continuing, I want to express deep gratitude to each member of your chapter steering committee. When it was clear that your chapter needed to be postponed, each of these women accepted the invitation to remain with the committee and to continue providing leadership for your chapter journey. Now, we all know that by now their work would have been finished. So I appreciate continuing to work with them, and I am so inspired by and grateful for their ongoing commitment. I also want to express deep gratitude to your leadership team. Each of them agreed to extend their term of leadership until such time as the chapter could convene to elect new leadership. Wow. This is an inspiring expression of love for and commitment to the congregation. I am deeply grateful, and I know that the congregation is grateful as well. And finally, sisters, I want to thank you, each of you, for your commitment to your role as a chapter delegate, for your yes to that very significant work. Yours is a sacred work in service to your congregation. But let's step back a minute and review what exactly is that sacred work of chapter that is going to be yours to do. Chapter is to reflect on and assess the ongoing life of the congregation, its faithfulness to mission, and its stewardship of resources in light of current realities. It is to set direction in light of this assessment and reflection. And it is to elect leadership to facilitate the community's movement forward and to manage the organizational realities of the Institute. So that is the work. And in our third order rule, we have a reminder of how we as Franciscans need to be about this sacred work. In every kind of chapter they have, let them seek first God's reign and justice, and exhort one another to better observe with greater dedication the rule they have professed and to follow faithfully in the footprints of our Lord Jesus Christ. In the letter you received giving you information about our next steps to chapter, we acknowledge that there has been a shift in how congregations think about chapters. This shift is challenging us to identify and seriously consider those issues and questions that are truly most critical for us and most in need of our attention right now. And though the restrictions of the pandemic have heightened our awareness of this shift, the pandemic is not the only circumstance that causes us to shift our understanding of our chapters. There are others that are part of the reality of our congregations. You know these well. The current realities are smaller, aging populations, our limited resources, our uncertainty about the future. But what's also true in our current realities is that we also believe in our capacity to continue to bring the light of our charism to the world in whatever way we can, given all of these circumstances. We are asking questions today about how best to discern this capacity that we have. And we are trying to discern how our chapters might need to be different in light of this. We are noticing that from chapter to chapter, we are often raising the same issues and generating statements that are very similar to those statements done in previous chapters. Now, in light of this, what does that mean for the work that is before you? In the beginning stages of preparation, you engaged processes to identify the significant issues and concerns you believe needed chapter consideration. Your reflections and your conversations resulted in generating 4 matters of importance to explore as you set direction for the next 4 years. It was clear from the feedback of your early reflections that there was a strong desire and a call to deepen your understanding of and your commitment to our Franciscan charism so that you can strengthen its impact on these 4 matters of importance. Your sense of outward mission to the poor and marginalized, individually and as a congregation. Your relationships, and these are just some of the subcomponents under relationships, with each other, with associates, with those we encounter in our lives each day, with those you serve, and with those with whom you serve, and of course, with Earth. A matter of importance of initial and ongoing formation, and also structures and resources, particularly governance and the responsible use of resources, individually and as a congregation. So, these, of course, sisters, are not new issues for you. They are reflected in your 2016 direction statement. And perhaps you can admit that they are reflected in earlier chapter statements as well. So as we approach your chapter of 2021, you may want to consider What are the new questions we want to ask of these matters of importance? What is the significant conversation about each of these matters that we haven't had yet, but really need to have? And I pause here for a moment and ask you just to consider these questions. Pope Francis's statement about COVID-19, which I quoted earlier, ends with this thought, which I think is very applicable in response to these questions. He said, "The present moment is time to choose between what matters and what passes away. A time to separate what is necessary from what is not." How does this statement align with your matters of importance? In light of all of this, the work that you as chapter delegates will be doing between now and August is to clarify and to determine how the matters of importance identified as the chapter agenda need to be moved forward most meaningfully and most effectively. As you know, due to the pandemic, much of this work will be done virtually prior to your chapter. And I will say to you, sisters, that since this is a new experience for most of us and most congregations, that it will demand of each of us a great deal of patience and tolerance with each other and with the system of Zoom. So how will you go about this work over these next months? The pre-work that you will do will be done in 4 steps. And these steps will culminate in step 5, which will be your chapter. So let's look at those steps. In step 1, you will review each matter of importance and consider the next steps for moving them forward meaningfully and effectively. Each step in this pre-chapter journey has 2 basic components to it. The first is a personal reflection to clarify your thoughts. You're used to this. This is how we have done the chapter preparation all along. In this first step, this personal reflection to clarify thoughts will begin February 22nd and go to March 11th. The second component of each step will be a Zoom gathering of delegates for further reflection and for conversations leading to conclusions about each matter of importance. In step 1, this gathering, this Zoom, will happen from March 11th to the 14th. You will choose which one would be best for you. In step 2, you as delegates will review the results of step 1. You will determine the final topics for chapter and offer, if applicable, some potential recommendations that might be considered around this particular matter of importance. Now, this step 2, again, your personal reflection, will happen between April 5th and the 15th. And the Zoom gathering of delegates will happen from the 15th to the 18th. Again, you will choose one of those Zooms that are scheduled. The third step is, after you have done your reflections and your conversations, and we have looked at what has resulted from that and tried to make meaning from all of that, a writing team will work to generate directives for chapters deliberation in whatever way we can, based on the input from your reflections and your Zoom gatherings. And they will be doing their work in May of 2021. Then the fourth step of this pre-chapter journey will be to begin the process for leadership discernment. This will happen in mid-May through July. And as I said, all of these steps will lead up to step number 5, which is your chapter, where you will set direction and elect a new leadership team. So I want to stop just a moment there to see if you can articulate any kind of questions that this raises for you. And you might want to write those questions down, and you can feel free to send those questions to a member of the chapter steering committee so that we can respond to any questions this might raise for you. So just take a moment to see if any questions or concerns emerge and write them down. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. That chapter date, you already know what it is, August 8th to the 15th. As I said, as I was listing the steps for you, prior to each of the Zooms, you will be invited into a pre-reflection process in order to prepare yourselves for the conversations. Each of the Zooms will be facilitated by one of the chapter steering committee members, and the results of the conversations will be gathered and sent to the steering committee for its review and refinement. So the intent of this work is to clarify the chapter agenda and to further refine it for the types of deliberations that you need as a chapter body. So, sisters, I have set the context for the work that you will be doing, especially the context of the realities that are yours. And I've outlined each step with its timeline. And as we move together into this next phase of preparation, we take our guidance from Francis, who says to us, this is very familiar to us, but let them pay attention to what they must desire above all else. to have the Spirit of the Lord and its holy activity. What is the Spirit's holy activity that you are being called to in these unprecedented times? What do you need in order to articulate that and to commit to actions that will be relevant for these challenging times? And when we began our preparations, of course, we looked to the invitation of Claire as our guiding point for how we will do the work that is ours to do. And we remember that we said that in gazing, we take a long, loving look at the life and your commitment to your mission, both its blessings and its challenges. Ilia Delio says that gazing requires a space within the heart to receive what we see and to embrace what we see. Sisters, how does God's unfolding mystery need to be embraced by you? And in light of this gazing, we will consider the meaning of that upon which we gaze. What are the questions that need to be asked now as you strive to continue to be faithful to your life and to the mission that you have espoused? And throughout the course of our journey, we, of course, will sit in that place of deep contemplation. And in that silence, to listen to how the Spirit is calling you to answer these questions within the context of this time in your history. And having done all this, in imitation of Francis and Claire, you will move forward authentically and faithfully to do what is yours to do. And I am confident that you will do it. So, sisters, I deeply appreciate this opportunity to be with you and to set before you the context and the work that is yours to do as chapter delegates from now and through your chapter. And as I end this session, I want to end it by offering you the words of Maya Angelou, who encourages us to continue to bring goodness and light to a fractured world. Her poem, Continue, really sheds light on how we are called to be that Franciscan light with our charism into this fractured and troubled world. Continue. Into a world which needed you, my wish for you is that you continue. Continue to be who you are and how you are. To astonish a troubled world with your acts of kindness. Continue in a society dark with cruelty to let the people hear the grandeur of God in the peals of your laughter. Continue to let your eloquence elevate the people to heights they had only imagined. Continue to remind the people that each is as good as the other, and that no one is beneath nor above you. Continue to put the mantle of your protection around the bodies of the young and the defenseless. Continue to take the hand of the despised and diseased and walk proudly with them in the high street. Some might see you and be encouraged to do likewise. Continue to let gratitude be the pillow upon which you kneel to say your nightly prayer. And let faith be the bridge you build to overcome evil and welcome good. Continue to ignore no vision which comes to enlarge your range and increase your spirit. Continue to dare to love deeply and risk everything for the good thing. Continue. And by doing so, you and your work will be able to continue eternally. So, sisters, I thank you for your attention today, for being present not only to me, but to one another. And I pray that this journey might be filled with the blessings that you and your congregation are most in need of at this time. So peace and all good to you. I will see you in August.